Welcome to Innovation at the Edge, a podcast dedicated to bold ideas that will build a more sustainable and resilient world. We interview global thought leaders and discuss what's new in innovation, and share insights for both entrepreneurs and corporations to build more agile and resilient businesses. Tomorrow's low-carbon and all-electric world will be created by both disruptive entrepreneurs and large corporations, and this podcast provides advice to both on how to scale their ideas.
To manage a decentralized approach to hydropower requires being able to manage distributed energy systems at scale. And then we're also working to provide the intelligence or the analytics around what's happening with our water resources through basically leveraging all the advances in machine learning and satellite imagery, et cetera, which give us real power to be able to better forecast and understand water and the water cycle.
Hi everyone, I'm Emmanuel, Chief Innovation Officer at Schneider Electric, and today I'm extremely pleased to have with us Gia Schneider. She's the founder and CEO of Natel Energy. As you know, at Schneider Electric, we promote a world where energy is decentralized, decarbonized, and digitized, and there is no better example than Natel Energy. When you think decarbonized electricity and decarbonized energy, usually you think wind power or solar. Well, there's another technology, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Gia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Emmanuel. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion and sharing a little bit more about how we can make hydropower a distributed, renewable, sustainable resource.
Good. So let's start with you first. So you started at a very big Swiss investment bank on the trading desk, and now you are one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in the area. What happened here from the successful career in banking to being a founder and CEO of a startup?
Yeah, it has been quite a journey. And I think it really goes back actually a little bit before my career in banking. I've always been I grew up being fairly aware of climate change as an issue that we face, and probably going all the way back to high school, maybe even a little earlier. And so in college, when I was looking at what I wanted to do, I'd started to look at energy, and the energy industry is clearly an industry that plays a really important role and will play an important role in terms of how we will tackle climate change. And so kind of that interest in learning and understanding some of the things that move the energy industry was what actually took me into banking. And then I, had the great fortune to be involved in working with Credit Suisse as they were working in energy commodities, getting into the carbon markets. And then there was kind of a very clear opportunity for me to move on after the, 2007. There was a big repositioning, of course, in the whole world financially. And it actually sparked a really great opportunity for me to then move forward with my brother, who co-founded the company with me. We had grown up again, with a long-standing interest in rivers and moving water. And so it was very natural for us to look at hydropower. So we had this kind of moment after the, kind of Great Recession, or in that sparked by that kind of said, you know what, if we're going to go and explore some of these ideas we've had about how we can innovate in hydropower, now's a great time to do it.
Wow, it's amazing how great companies are created in times of downturns and crises, right? So that was the moment. The last time there was a big crisis, this is when you guys decided to start Natel Energy, right?
Yeah, and I think actually that it's not, as a corollary almost to today, and as we look forward, crises create the opportunity for change. There's a lot of inertia that's built into our systems and in energy, in infrastructure in particular. There's a lot of inertia, right? Because it's a lot of sunk cost and a lot of, things that are physical in the ground. They take a long time to plan and build, and a long time to repair and replace and evolve. And so crises actually create kind of really useful moments to spark change. Now, in our case, we had been thinking about, doing something innovative and entrepreneurial. That had been kind of a part of something we had both wanted to pursue for quite some time. And it just kind of lined up with that time as an appropriate moment to take advantage of the crisis opportunity, if you will, to spark the change.
And that's a great point. Even if this crisis was not triggered by anything related to energy, we see definitively that this agenda of decarbonization and decentralization of energy has been fast forwarded, and this is one of the things that has been accelerated in this COVID crisis, definitely. So that's a great point. But let's go back to the creation of Natel Energy. So you start the business with your brother. Your father was also involved, right, at that time. So how was it, that family story?
Actually, the reason why climate change, as I referred to, was one of my grounding interests, really goes back to my dad. So my dad was, we grew up learning that climate change is water change, that climate change would mean hotter, wetter, colder, drier, was kind of his simple way of summarizing it. Anyhow, so he was kind of the grounding, kind of foundational inspiration for both my brother and I, and our, what has turned into our lifelong focus in working on solutions or ways in which we can both adapt and evolve in the context of climate change. And so when we started the company, it was very natural for the three of us to launch it together. I would say serendipitously, my brother was a mechanical engineer by training, also MIT. We happen to have this very complementary skill set. So I think that, I don't know, maybe my father had a grand plan in mind. I don't think he did from the time that we were born. It just so happened that we basically had very complementary skill sets. And so, my brother is our CTO, and really drives the technology evolution. And it started actually with some initial ideas that my father had around hydropower and around ways in which we could evolve to a more sustainable way to tackle hydropower. My dad kind of had the very original idea that launched us down this journey. My brother is the CTO and the engineers to really take that and turn it into, the practical application. And then I was more in charge of, in the early days, everything else, whether it was regulatory or policy or finance, that kind of all fell into my bucket. In the early days, I remember pitching to an investor who was was very frank. He was like, if you and your brother were college roommates, this would be awesome, no problem. But the fact that you are siblings is a little bit scary. We've definitely had that reaction in the early days. I think that at this point, we don't tend to get that as much because we have now worked together successfully for a long time. It's frankly it's been really enjoyable. There's a level of trust that does come from having grown up with someone. Yeah, it's like a foundational level of trust that really has, I think, helped us get us through some really hard times when we were flat out. There's so much to do. You don't have enough people or money to get it done. Well, those problems are related. So you don't have enough people to get it done, which means, each of you is just working as hard as you possibly can. And the ability to have that trust was probably really critical to get us through those times.
That's a great story. Yeah, and definitely your brother, not someone, or your sister, not someone you can let down, right? So even in the difficult moments. So that's and when you're starting a business like this, you really need to have a very cohesive team. Tell me what it is like to be a successful female entrepreneur in the Silicon Valley today, because this is not common. I would argue that in clean tech, or at least in the topics that we are working on at Schneider Electric, there's probably more women leading new businesses or new ideas, like you, like Emily at Powerhouse, on a different topic. But how does it feel? How is it? So, is it harder? How do you think you have to play by different rules?
What I do think is an increasing number of women CEOs, founders, co-founders, particularly in the clean energy space. I do think that folks like Emily help bear credit in helping broaden the message and kind of build awareness of what is possible. I think that what she and the team at Powerhouse have built is really incredible in terms of being, a platform to help companies in the clean tech space get started and grow. And that kind of support really does help women and diverse founders, co-founders, CEOs, et cetera, succeed. I think that it's hard to know exactly, because I haven't lived an experience as anyone other than who I am. So it's hard to know if it's easier or harder than anyone else. I think that the bottom line is that we still have obviously room for improvement. At the end of the day, I think we've made good progress in improving diversity in Silicon Valley. I think that we have a lot of room for continued growth in that area. It doesn't surprise me that in clean tech, we're seeing that response, in part because I do think that there might be a natural affinity to a certain extent in terms of thinking about existential problems and big change that draws. I think that the blunt reality is that the vast majority of investors that I talk with are not female, and that's again an area where as things evolve, as things change, that'll be an important element of growth.
So let's go to Natel Energy now. So again, one of the reason why we have decided to invest in Natel Energy, and it's not only because of you and your brother and all the great things that you've been doing, but it's also because it's perfectly aligned with this agenda of decentralization, decarbonization, and digitization of electricity and energy in general. But as I was saying at the beginning, when you say decarbonization of energy, a lot of people think, yeah, of course, wind power, solar, and very few people actually think hydro. So what is Natel Energy about?
Natel Energy is about transforming hydropower, which is a renewable resource that has been around and been used actively for decades, almost a century at this point, and evolving it for what we think of as the future, when we think of modern, sustainable hydro. What that means is when we look forward, hydropower is the clear opportunity for hydros to go to be a much more distributed or decentralized energy source. The history in hydropower has been to build large, centralized, big dams, basically civil infrastructure projects. You have projects like Three Gorges or Hoover Dam or Grand Coulee, right, where you're talking, gigawatts in a single project. And really, when we look forward for a lot of reasons, it's pretty clear that the future is to build more distributed projects. And my analogy for it, just to kind of in layman's terms understand what we mean when we say making hydro distributed, is that a large individual dam is kind of like if you were to jump off of the roof of a building, like rappel down the side of the building to get to the ground floor, as opposed to walking down the stairs. And what we do with distributed hydro at Natel is we make it possible to walk down the stairs, to take out energy in steps down a river, down a watershed, and do so in a way that is safe for fish, that helps either continue and conserve, or else in some cases restore river connectivity. And by doing so, that also has a whole host of really positive benefits in the context of climate change, like helping to slow water runoff down. That will help mitigate floods, helps drive groundwater recharge. There's all these additional benefits that come out of this fact that hydropower is a water resource as well as an energy resource. And so our focus has been, how do we provide solutions that enable that distributed future for hydropower, both on the hardware side, which requires fish-safe modern turbines, on the control side. This is one of the reasons why, of course, we are working with Schneider Electric, because to manage a decentralized approach to hydropower requires being able to manage distributed energy systems at scale. And then we're also working to provide the intelligence or the analytics around what's happening with our water resources through basically leveraging all the advances in machine learning and satellite imagery, et cetera, which give us real power to be able to better forecast and understand water and the water cycle.
Yeah, so that's great. So it's sustainable on all fronts, right? So you don't need that big dam and a lot of civil works and to pour concrete, and because basically you put the turbine in the bed of the river in a very sustainable fashion. It's sustainable because it produces energy on the right amount in a highly distributed system. And what is also unique is the design of your turbine for fish passage, right? Which is also unique, because if you look at how that problem was traditionally solved, that was actually quite disturbing. And you've also not only brought a new way to have distributed energy resources, but also to be much more sustainable in the usage and the management of the water and the river in general. Can you talk a bit more about this?
If you have a cascade of distributed hydropower projects, that means you want to ensure passage and connectivity at every single point, right? In that, as you come down a river or down a water system. And if you're going to do that, that puts some very specific design constraints on how you design a turbine. And so in our hardware innovation, we basically started out with near 100% safe passage for fish as our design criteria. That was kind of our leading design criteria. And then we layered on the obvious fact that we want to deliver that environmental performance, but without compromising on energy output. At the end of the day, we need both. And so that balance, that push and pull, if you will, between maintaining fish safety while also maintaining hydraulic performance, that the turbine produces a lot of energy at world-class efficiency, drove our whole engineering process. And that's what we've been able to do. Actually, we got some fish testing results coming out here very shortly that will be at 100% safe passage for fish. with, modern power electronics and controls, you're now able to operate that distributed cascade as an integrated virtual power plant that enables what would have been smaller individual energy projects in the past that would have been very hard to manage for grid resources. It makes it possible now to manage those distributed hydropower projects in a way that can deliver grid resources.
This is one of the unique things about Natel Energy, because a river becomes a VPP, a virtual power plant, right? So with everything in it, you have the generation part and the storage, because of course you can manage the storage with water. Actually, your software side on this is pretty powerful. Can you describe a bit what you do on the control and software side precisely to really transform a river into VPP, into a virtual power plant?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of does, again, ground our technology approach, which is that you need to have, in order to run such a distributed VPP efficiently, you need to understand what's happening with water flow, because in hydropower, the fuel is water. And what we realized is that the historical way of forecasting water flow either relies on physical flow gauges, so you have to go and install an expensive piece of hardware that you have to maintain to get, actual physical measurements of flow, or you can do a model that models a landscape, combines that with weather data to come up with an expectation of water flow. And what we realized is that with satellite imagery, and which now is, there's been a rapid proliferation of satellite imagery, and with the reduction in cost and increase in power of computing, that we could apply machine learning algorithms to that satellite imagery to extract on a very regular basis. And that allows us to deliver a more accurate forecast of what's going to happen with water flow. You can capture events like the wildfires right now that are happening, for example, in California, because when you burn thousands, in this case, millions of acres of land, the way in which water will run off that landscape changes. And that is, with our software system, is automatically factored into the forecast. Those things combined allow us to now operate a VPP to turn a river into what would have in the past been, a single large concentrated civil, big hydro system into a distributed energy system. And when you talk, I find it really fascinating about where this could go, because when you think about, projects, for example, in developing countries, where historically you might have had to wait 10 years to get a big hydro project online, we can now talk about, bringing online 100 megawatts, 50 megawatts this year, next year, the year after. And that's much more matched to the needs of the population for energy, as opposed to having to wait 10 years before you get your single megawatt hour of output. It also opens up some really interesting ways to then start to hybridize around microgrid applications with, for example, solar and batteries, where you have now a hydro kind of component that's kind of backing your microgrid with some batteries and some solar.
Exactly, because not only you are reinventing hydro, making it more sustainable on all dimensions, as we said, you are bringing this opportunity of transforming our rivers into VPPs if we want. But on top of this, if you start mixing this with wind and solar and lithium-ion storage and other storage technologies, you can create a completely new decentralized energy system where all those sources can back up each other and go through different weather conditions and or wind regimes and or water availability, and all this in a much more sustainability fashion than ever before. Schneider Electric co-invested with Breakthrough Energy Ventures in Natel. That was a few months ago. So Breakthrough Energy Ventures, for those who are not familiar, is that $1 billion fund that Bill Gates initiated right after the Paris conference back in 2015, and where the board of that fund is an impressive collection of climate-conscious billionaires, and definitely showing the way and leading the way. And of course, those people are extremely selective on where they invest their money. And Natel is one of their investments. So we invested there together with Breakthrough. And what that says is that for technologies like the ones you're creating, the traditional ecosystem of venture capitalists, which would defend itself saying that they were burnt in clean tech 1.0 back in the days, and is still not looking at these type of ventures as they should probably, and it still take corporates or very courageous and very impactful funds like Breakthrough to do that. What's your view on the involvement of traditional VC money, especially in the Silicon Valley in clean tech these days?
investing in clean tech does really require long-term committed capital and capital that understands the application space, right? So we're talking about, investing in infrastructure, in energy. Infrastructure and energy are spaces that there's a lot of, frankly, can be quite scary things when you start thinking about as a venture investor, and particularly maybe a Silicon Valley venture investor, when it comes to like regulations and timeframes and sales cycles and all that. But I do think that corporate venture teams who are grounded in a perspective of understanding the industry and what it takes to really sell and scale solutions in this industry do have an advantage in perspective. Absolutely. And I also fundamentally think that funds like Breakthrough are also critical, because both things are true. Like it is a space that requires long-term visionary capital that is willing to invest and wants to invest in transformative change, and smart understanding of what is involved in driving change in this space. And again, I think that's where certainly Schneider Electric, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, some of the other folks who are investing in and being successful in this space are able to bring those to the table in both making investments and then also obviously, helping and working with companies as they scale.
And to your point, right? So there are several innovations happening at the same time. And at Natel, what you've been able to do is to make the most of all those, right? Because it's not only about a very sustainable turbine that sits on the bed of the river, which is just like an amazing piece of technology, but it's also your software, the satellite imaging, all the AI you've built on top of this, the analytics, and how you will integrate that river VPP in the future of decentralized energy system. So what's next? What is the next, to the extent you can share it with us, but what's next on your agenda in terms of technology development? Where do you go next in the integration of all those technologies and innovations that are happening around us?
Despite coronavirus and having to manage around that, obviously, which everyone has had to manage around this year has been really a major transition year for us. So we have actually just commissioned our second plant just in the last month. It's a first deployment actually of our megawatt class turbine product. On the software side, it's been an important year for us. We're now informing over 1.2 gigawatts of hydropower plant operations. We're close to doubling that very soon here with a deal that we should get closed this quarter. So as we look out over the next couple of years, we're really focused on scaling and getting to where we actually are deploying BPPs at scale, informed by the analytics that we bring to the table on the water forecasting side.
Great, that's amazing. And then, all this to say that we're just getting started. So Natel is just an amazing company already, and this is why some of the most impactful investors in the world of clean tech have decided to bet on Gia, her brother, and the entire Natel team.
So one other point that I would just make is that in context of entrepreneurs who are looking at tackling what is undoubtedly not necessarily an easy space, particularly if you have something in hardware like we did and do, is the software component is critical to our overall commercial plan and success. It is also a way for us to bring in revenue, right? Solidify sales and revenue in a way that is not as coupled to just hardware deployment cycles. And in particular, in this case, it's because our software and analytics can be deployed across the existing installed base of hydropower assets. And there's 1.3 terawatts of installed hydropower globally. And so I'll just note that that's been an important part as we've built the business, and also why we very intentionally incorporated an analytics component into what we are doing. We package it with hardware, sell it, get more deployments of the software as we sell more turbines. There's a virtuous cycle there. It's also a product that allows us to accelerate sales and revenue ahead of development cycles and all the other things that are involved in actually getting hardware deployed and in the field at scale.
Yeah, it's a great point, right? Because it's not only about mechanics and capital intensive, but a large part of the value is also coming from those analytics and that software. And it's really about decentralized, decarbonized, and digital. Combining those three is pretty unique, and you're showing it. You're showing it every day. And also a great lesson in leadership for all of us, with all that journey from the creation of Natel Energy, and it was very courageous, and you were tenacious, you and your brother and your father, and it's happening. It's a great vision, and you're I mean, arguably, you're changing the world. So that's amazing and humbling for all of us. So Gia, thank you very much for your time and for being here. I hope we can see each other soon, face to face, not only on Zoom. And all the best to Natel Energy and to you and for the rest of the year.
Absolutely. Like I said, pleasure to be here. I really appreciate it, Emmanuel. And yes, it will be hopefully soon here. We'll be able to get through all of this coronavirus and move back to a more normal existence. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Innovation at the Edge by Schneider Electric. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you'll never miss an episode. If you like this episode, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. For more information on the Innovation at the Edge program at Schneider Electric, go to se.com/ventures or follow us on LinkedIn. The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be undertaken as financial, economic, legal, business, tax, or investment advice. The information, statements, views, and opinions should not be construed as the provision of advice by Schneider Electric, or as an offer to buy or sell any products or services, or to make or consider an investment or course of action.